So, welcome to the CO Grind podcast, another episode. Today, we have a fantastic guest here with us. His name is Eric Kullenberg. He's the founder of Studio Haus in São Paulo, Brazil, the first Airbnb franchise in Brazil, a really interesting new model. I think he's originally from Maine and moved to Brazil 15 or 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? And so tons of interesting stories and travels that he has done through the world. I know he has done work in Japan. He has done work all over the world. I forgot how many languages he speaks. I know I speak 3 and he beats me on that, and some crazy languages. I don't know what he does. So Eric, welcome to the CO Grind podcast with Jay Silva and Wesley Rosenberg. On the background helping us out, we have Keegan Rosette. How are you?
I'm great. It's always an early morning for me, so I've gotten very, very, very productive. I wake up usually around 4 and wait for some place to open so I can get coffee. And then, I do a lot of writing spreadsheets that require a lot of concentration. And I have difficulty doing that during commercial hours. So I actually find that I work a lot outside of commercial hours, particularly in the mornings. Sunday morning is actually one of my favorite times to work. I don't work all day. I love to, get outside and enjoy nature during the day on Sunday. But, I'm super productive early in the morning. So it's definitely been one of those mornings. So glad to be here.
So, Eric, when do you quit working? I know you say you start in the morning. I mean, and at 10,
not to get into not to get into too much minutia about my personal life, but I find that I'm much better at the gym around 10 in the morning, just the way that my normal, body ritual, whether right word is ritmo, works. I speak Portuguese, body clock. And so then I like to also eat and do stuff outside of peak periods. So I usually eat lunch a little bit earlier than everyone. And then if I'm in the office, I go home a little bit earlier than everyone. And so, at night, I'm pretty unproductive for the most part. So yeah, I mean, I'm not a workaholic. I don't work very much at night, to be quite honest. And so, yeah, that's my routine.
Okay, good stuff.
I love it.
Can you talk more about that? So you started this franchising in Brazil, is that right?
Yeah, this is a business that's constantly evolving over the past 5 years. The short version is that, I noticed that there was a lot of high end and low end places to stay. Let's even say not even to live or to rent, but just to stay in Sao Paulo. 5 years ago, Brazil is a place that offers a lot of opportunity because it has scale, but not a lot of products. So in the US, you have scale, but you also have a lot of products and a lot of competition. If you have a good product in Brazil, you can be extremely successful just for the fact that you don't have as much competition. So hospitality has come a long way, and so has living in a long way in Sao Paulo over the past 5 years and past 10 years. And so now it's much more common to have, studios and Airbnb and luxury buildings and that kind of stuff. So, but those kind of things are not accessible to the average person. They're astronomically expensive. You might spend one night in Houseu, which is a luxury Airbnb development, is about half of minimum wage for a month. So you can see that there's $100 is not a lot of money for a foreigner, but 700 reais for one night versus 1,500 is the minimum salary in Brazil. You can see how it might be a little bit problematic for some people to pay that much. So actually, I didn't start out doing Airbnb or franchising. I started out just thinking about converting houses into monthly rental units. That was the original idea. So that's what I did, originally for the first, I would say, actually by the second month, I was already looking at the Airbnb rates and doing the calculations and thinking, okay, well, I could make twice as much if the average daily rates pan out for me. At the time, I think it was something like 150 reais. And so that would have been like 4,000 or 5,000. And we were charging 2,000 per month. So I could see it was double or triple. So I said, okay, let's give it a shot. So gradually I put all the rooms online in Airbnb, then I added booking, and then just sort of business was born organically, I would say, over a period of about a year, just testing and retesting and trying to figure out labor, which was a huge problem with so few rooms. Airbnb looks like a lot of fun, but labor is really, really tricky because it depends a lot on how many rooms you have. And, if you have one apartment, okay, they may come, you might spend 100, 150 guys or whatever. And that's, some people will pay that. That's fine. But then you get into 5 and 7, 10, you really have to figure out, your efficiencies and what's the sort of minimum that involve, and then what's the minimum amount for them to work. So most people that work for us live, a good 2 hours by public transport away, unfortunately. And so the minimum level of engagement in Sao Paulo has also skyrocketed. The minimum level of engagement. So it's very difficult. I'm not going to speak dollars. I mean, it's 5-1. I think it's easier if I just speak KIs. So meaning, Jay, that it doesn't matter if I want to change one light bulb or 10. No one's going to do it for under 150 AIs.
Oh, I understand. Basically,
So if I have one light bulb to change, like I actually do right now, that's my problem. The person who's changing it doesn't care. They have to spend the time and the energy to get to the house. They can't just get in their pickup and it's not 10 minutes away, like in rural Maine where I grew up. It's a grind. Yeah, I threw in the grind there. It's a real grind to get around Sao Paulo. It's a fake city. Sao Paulo is not one city. It's 10 cities that are all just close to they've all merged into one, basically. In my opinion, it's not one city because I could never figure that out. Like, why does it seem the size of like San Francisco or Boston when I look around? I just could never figure that out. But now that I've been to the other cities, like I was just stayed in Santander, and there's down in the south, and then you have, all these different pockets around the city. So yeah, it's difficult to get around here still. And so figuring out the labor has a lot to do with that unfortunate reality of the city. And so it took a long time for me to sort of understand, what the right number of rooms was, how do I combine that with what's available in the real estate market, basically, and have a match. And I think that we've found that, over the past few months. And then to make, a long story short, once I figured out once I felt strongly that I had sort of product market fit, then I struggled to find the right vehicle because.
What do you mean by vehicle? Just
what's the right financial structuring to involve others, even myself. Right. So I'm a true, nothing, I'm sure, very comparable to Jay. I'm a real jack of all trades. I've worked all kinds of in different sectors. And even today I wear 10 different hats in the company, just like Jay does. I knew basically how a real estate fund works. I know how it works, basically. I think it's an antiquated, structure with a lot of risk, particularly for your personal life, I think. So that didn't appeal to me very much. The idea of just simply trying to build a huge company, like some people do, also didn't appeal to me very much because I'm not a very corporate person. It was always difficult for me working in offices. I worked in big ad agencies in New York for many, many years and realized way too late that I hated that. So, those two options were not that interesting to me. I'd done a lot of friends and family. That is fun at first and then can get a little bit complex with people not wanting to change informality into formality, which is something that Jay and I are being really careful on. And I like that about him, that he's also he wants everything to be formal. I was actually online a year ago and I saw an ad for a franchise, which was actually more and I clicked on it and I decided, okay, I'm going to do the commercial process. So one of the things that we do in as real estate investors, obviously, is we really live the brand. Meaning, like, if I'm going to invest, I'm going to go and stay in that hotel, right? I'm going to see exactly what things are like, firsthand. I'm not going to just look at it on the internet. So I did the commercial process. I engaged with a salesperson as if I had the capital ready, and I looked at the investment and I looked at all the risks and the amount of engagement, the administration, the complexity, all these things. And I thought, my business is way better than this one. And then I started looking at the key sectors of franchises, which are retail and restaurants, which I know are hugely risky, low margin, hugely complex operations. And so every time I looked at any other franchise, I thought, okay, mine would be better. I mean, naturally, if you put it into like a chart as far and look at all the different characteristics, what I have today is something that is low, very high demand. It has low or not complex labor demands, doesn't have any special equipment. The only real downside is that is 24 hours a day, 365 days a week are closed. So me having a little bit of a an electric sort of personality sort of goes hand in hand. Getting back to the franchise, I still feel that way. I think that the general thing about franchises is for them, it's about, it's a numbers game in terms of scale. I think that they oversell to maximize the number of sales. It's low margins. They don't justify the fees that they take. And I know the numbers that they give are wrong or lies, basically. I mean, I think that if you tell me that I'm going to earn 20% and then the payback is 2 years, I mean, who can't do that math? So I basically, the cool thing about franchises is that they're regulated. In Brazil, it's the federal government. In US, it's mixed like everything. But the federal government regulates franchise. And so you have legal requirements and you use a consultant, to guide you through that process. And so the consultant basically just produces, 6 key documents for you. They do an underwriting, a basic, market study. Then they send you the legal offer documents called COF in Brazil. I don't know what it's called in the US, but it has all the, legalese as far as what you can present to a potential investor, right? To sort of cover all the bases. And they presented the contract for the franchisee, the actual contract, which obviously would need to be, massaged and edited by a lawyer, but our lawyer, but that's where they present the model. They send the 2 manuals. Manuals? I think it's manual. Yeah, manual. You have to have a manual, right? Which, it might be an antiquated term, but you do need something written, right? To demonstrate detail. Yeah, exactly. So, but they send one for the franchisor and one for the franchisee. I don't know what, I was confused even in Portuguese of the names of the people. But anyway, so they send all these documents to me, and they send sort of one every month. And the first one, I was just my heart sort of sank. I was like, who did I hire? What is this? It felt like they just sent me cut and paste my name on the front and just sent me this 50-page PDF. And it said things like, well, let me say that. At first, I was very, 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 very shocked and scared. The more I thought about it, though, then I started to think, oh, wait a minute. Okay. So because the big thing was that they couldn't find any competition for me. So their SWOT sucked. It didn't make any sense.
There's strength,
right?
opportunities, right. and threats.
Yeah, right? They couldn't make any reasonable references to the business because right now we have no competition. So at first I thought that was a really bad thing. The more I thought about it, I was like, okay, this is a really good thing. Actually, they couldn't find any competition. So I'll take all their boilerplate document. And the other big part of this was actually they required to review and approve. They call it a DRE. I guess you would call it a balance sheet, but actually the truth is, I would say it's a simplified financial model, right? That basically shows mathematically that this is what I invested. This is the monthly costs, variable and fixed. This is the result. This is how the result compares to prove that I really am able to generate, 3.5% per month or 40% a year or whatever it is exact number that we're using. So that was a big part of it as well. And so that market study at the end, there's a point system they used, and I think I had to get 70, and I got 70. What a coincidence! And then I was thinking about that, in the contract they sent me, there's no clause that says if I don't get approved that they somehow return the money or whatever. So I don't know what the hell they do that. Anyway, I assume that they pre-approve people, and they're pretty excited about our idea. So I'm not worried about that. But anyway, so that was sort of my first experience with franchising. And then I got all the other documents and thought they were, equally as stupid, but that's obviously from my very sort of
Eric, let me ask you this. As far as franchising as a vehicle for you to grow, right? Like when I met, you were sold on this idea and you wanted to share it. Dude, I don't know how you get your properties in the US, Jay, but if you're not doing the way that I'm thinking of doing, that I'm preparing, that you already had the document, pretty much done, you're not doing the right way. So what is exactly the thing?
It goes back to what I said about it being regulated. So basically it allows us to create investor confidence and also create liquidity. If I go to the market and I try to sell Eric and Jay's hotel or Eric's hotel, there's not really, first of all, you have to negotiate the contract of that, which is starting from scratch. So there's no rules to the game. So then it becomes sort of a wild west as far as what you put in the contract. And then what's their exit? And so I think with what I realized about franchises is the benefits would be you'd have a lot of potential investors already familiar with the vehicle, and then you'd have a secondary market. So now we're more focused on the secondary. Then when I started thinking about the secondary market, it's like, okay, well, I've already flipped houses, and that was really difficult. I mean, that was really risky and crazy and potential for lost money. What if I actually started flipping businesses that have cash flow? Then I wouldn't have the pressure to sell because I have cash flow already. It doesn't matter when I sell; it just goes up in value, obviously. But I want to find the right moment to sell, but I don't have a downside selling a business. We're taking a lot of different models, which is, basic, Airbnb, then you've got franchising and then you've got hotels as well. So this is a whole nother side of it is the hotel model has basically gone capital light over the past 20 years. I mean, logically, if you would think about maybe Marriott owned 20,000 hotels and now they own 2, that sort of thing. I'm exaggerating. But of course, that's
capital light, meaning they have franchised most of their locations. Is that what you're saying?
Meaning they don't own any real estate assets anymore. Right. And so the capital that they use is for renovations and startup costs, basically. And so, but now not even that, because they are pushing. So now you've got Marriott, you've got the investor of the property and the investor of the operations. So that's the same model that I want to use, basically, with one key difference, which is the word on the street in the US is that they've gone too far and they're diluting and they're diluting their brand, and people are having bad brand experiences because their franchisees are not experienced enough to provide the kind of experience that someone going to a Hilton or Marriott or whatever, is looking for. We want to not do that.
Well, may I say something? That you're getting franchisees that can't carry the name.
No, what I'm saying is that the market is saying that in the US, as the hotel operating companies go down this path of becoming less involved in the day-to-day operations, that the market is saying that consumers are saying that the quality is going down. Okay, but this is really bad for the brand.
Right.
This is a bad branding decision that I don't want to repeat.
Yes.
It's the opposite.
And that just one point there, that can be solved when you're designing your franchise. So when you're talking about an operating playbook and responsibilities, etc., and how much you're going to invest to support that franchisee and being the best operator that they can be, that can be the difference between a brand that doesn't dilute their brand versus one that does, because you within your mission and the way that you operate.
Right.
One angle.
Go ahead, Mons.
That question, I think.
Yeah. So I asked the first question about the interview process, and you said, no, that's not necessarily the case. But the next question brought another question. Then are you as a franchisor, then you aren't properly giving the training and successes to this franchise to keep the brand strong? And
no,
what can you do as a franchisor to get these guys, a franchisee, to follow your model if they're not following it, or you haven't given them enough assistance to implement those standard operating procedures that your model carry?
Let me see if I can answer your question in sort of an exaggerated way. Next weekend, Jair and I are going to South Beach together. I have my 10 units and he has his 20 units. And we're going to sit on the beach there together, and we're going to drink Mai Tais. And we're going to run our companies from our cell phones.
So what are you trying to
say? My idea is that we would not have the franchisees involved in the daily operations. We're going to take on those responsibilities using technology.
Okay, so like the rooms they're not cleaned up to snuff.
I've already worked. We work on those sort of procedures all the time, so that basically we are able to control everything remotely, 99%. So, but it's a very good question. So in our offering, what are we saying that we want is it's a really wild card. It's a lot of different ways to do things, right? And so it's very good if you're a little bit hands-on when it comes to maintenance, because if you're not, then you could either get something done wrong or you spend a lot more than you need to. A lot of problem solving that's involved in maintenance. And it's helpful to have someone there personally, especially if they have an interest in the cost in the renovations. If you don't have any, I do maintenance remotely, but when there's something that might get more expensive if I don't go, then I go, basically. So those are the two main things that we're interested in having a remote franchisee do. As far as all the other operational things, whether it's reservations, the day-to-day cleaning, organizing of the cleaning, releasing the rooms, talking to guests, all that kind of stuff that was sort of done person to person 10 years ago, 20 years ago is now all done by a chat. So that's what I said that's what I meant when I said that I'm interested in being more hands-on with the brand and the standards, because we found a way to really truly manage our business for the 99% remote or 98% remotely. So that's sort of.
I have a question from the chat window, which our chat window is Keegan. And his question was, is this product scalable in other countries like USA, Europe, Asia, etc.? Like, is this
So in Europe, we have a reference that we've been following called Bob W, which I think is a terrible name in English for an American, but the Europeans decided that best of both worlds might be called Bob W. So fine. They have, I don't know how many rooms, I think 1,000 rooms, and they're retrofitting larger properties, but they're doing the same kind of product. It's a hybrid hotel Airbnb space, marketing to younger people and doing the whole thing with, online. And so there's no reception, that kind of stuff. So Europe has that. With regards to other countries, there's two things. First is the actual real estate market itself. So as you can imagine, today we're doing only retrofits. So a commercial building of, a couple of thousand square feet is going to look very different in Boston, in New York, Miami, Sao Paulo, and Rio. Very, very different. Extremely different. I mean, you can't get more different than those 5 cities. So we have to figure out, how to manage that. I have some ideas for Rio. I've been looking at Miami. The buildings are going to be bigger if we go into Miami. So real estate market, stock, that's the first thing we need to think about. The other big thing is, where are we going to have the best opportunity for cost efficiency on the renovations, right? So one of the main things if you look at a map and you start plotting where are the business hotels, where are the Starbucks, that's one obvious thing to do. But I've actually been looking at WeWork as one of the big ones. It doesn't matter. It could be functioning or already gone bankrupt. It doesn't matter to me. The question is about the underwriting. Like, why did they choose a WeWork there? What's around it 1 kilometer? And so Paulo, there's a disconnect between where the WeWorks are and where the metro stations are, because the metro stations are all new and the WeWorks are around old traditional business neighborhoods. So that's a big opportunity for us, because there's not a lot of competition from Airbnb, from luxury buildings around the WeWorks. So in Miami, I was looking at, there's a Regis, which is near, I want to do a project in Wynwood, which is a business, closer to the business neighborhoods. And so, just start sort of like thinking about, okay, what are the, where do I know the kind of people that I want to attract are going to be? What are their 2 options, right? We need to make sure that they have the luxury option, luxury Airbnb option that we can be, 20 or 30% below. And maybe they have a regular Airbnb option, which is going to be 50% less, which is just random apartments. You don't know what you're going to get. You don't know who the host is. You don't know what the amenities are. Is it going to have Wi-Fi? You have no idea. So it's kind of a crapshoot. So our target is to the people that want to be, they're paying the bill. The company's not paying the bill. So they don't want to spend the luxury. But if they stay in the cheap Airbnb, they have the risk of not being productive. So they don't want to take that risk.
That's true.
They're there to work.
That is very true.
When I looked at Miami, I was able to put all the pieces together there pretty quickly. What we don't, just to answer your question, what we don't have today is a really strong vacation rural strategy. I think that would take some time. I think that even secondary, tertiary cities, I'm not really sure. I don't have a strong feeling about that yet. I think one of the problems in Brazil is the rates. You might see 5,000 at the W hotel, the new W, but once you leave the key really high-end neighborhood, high business and residential neighborhoods, you're pretty much at 180 anywhere. Not a lot of real high rates once you get outside the key metropolitan areas in Brazil. So those are the considerations that I would have. I think that as funny as it might sound, if there's a WeWork by you, it might be a good location. There's a little bit more complexity to that. obviously, but I look, I think co-working, large international co-working locations, in addition to, medium priced business hotels and also fair amount of luxury Airbnbs would be a location that I would be interested in.
Outstanding. Now, is there still value in the human experience with customer service today? Like, do you still value that and moving away from that? Like, is there still value?
I actually don't. It's funny you say that because we're not actually moving away from it. One of the biggest surprises to me through this whole process of really, starting from zero, starting from not even knowing if Airbnb was going to work, because our buildings are not the prettiest on the block. These are.
Oh yeah, man.
Yeah.
May I say something for
Yeah, sure.
Les and for viewers? When the model of the franchise in Brazil for the Airbnb, the short-term rentals, works so well because you were getting the prime locations, as
Yeah.
Eric is saying, but using buildings that were essentially designed and converted so many times that they are now all commercial, right?
Yeah.
So you have all the needs that any metro person would need, right, to live and to work, low transportation costs. And because it's a little bit more dense, usually you have greater security, right? You have people moving all times of the day. So you get the best of both worlds. So you're getting access to the asset with a lower price, more flexibility, total control, and not being at the mercy of regulatory things that could.
Yeah.
It is
Exactly. So basically, it's funny is it brought me back to when I first started, and so I tried. First, I tried meeting people at the door, like, "Hey, like, well, no, I'm just like pretending it's a hotel," and I got a lot of funny looks from people, and I felt like maybe it wasn't quite right. So then I tried the opposite, which was, all right, I think people don't want to have anything to do with me. So then I tried, sort of like hiding in the bushes and just letting people see if they can figure out the electronic locks and that kind of stuff. And so fast forward a year later, and I have like, a list of 20 VIP clients that I would consider friends. I've met maybe 3 of them. I had dinner with one of them once, but we're having a very human connection, right? And
Right.
so that was an amazing shock and surprise to me that in many cases, I know through booking is even worse, as you know, Jay, you can't see, there's no picture. At least in Airbnb is a picture, and what's up, there's pictures, right? Booking, there's no picture. And so that feels a little bit too disconnected to me. It's a little bit harder. The thing is that you have a lot of people that that confuse, automation and technology with a human connection. So one of the things that I'm adamant about is I use normal language when I talk to people on Airbnb and booking and chat. I don't use formal Brazilian language. I'm not very good at it, obviously, as a foreigner. I just started using gentileza like 6 months ago, and I've been living in Brazil for 15 years. I sort of know when to use it.
Hold on. Explain to what it means.
It's just a more formal version of please. But there's very, very specific situations that you would use it. And I had a business partner that was also a foreigner, and I could tell he was using it in the wrong situations. He's like, that's wrong. I never use a lot of, I rarely use formal Portuguese now that with guests. And at the same time, I don't use emojis. I use emojis to, to comment, but not like I have a nice day and then a happy face. Like, so I think that the idea that I try my best to talk to people on the chat as if they're friends staying at my house, that has had a lot of positive effect for me because I sense that people can see that I'm attentive and rational and logical, and well. There's still a fair amount of human robot customer service in Brazil. They have a certain way they talk, and they can't get out of it. And if you ask them to repeat it, they say it the exact same way 3 times. And so there's this sort of like robot mentality of how you speak to a customer, and that can be extremely annoying.
Funny that same way has been the same way for 25 years. In Brazil, I did some work in call centers, and it's robotic how they train, and the flexibility is never there. it is never there on Brazilian customer service.
Yeah, it's just it's also cultural, you know. I mean, one of the biggest ways that you can understand the difference between Brazil and the US is the following. If you ask a waiter, any waiter in any restaurant in Brazil, what he recommends, he will tell you this is what people order the most. That is black and white. And if you can find, Jay, an example in your head of where that wasn't the case, you let me know, because I've never had the opposite happen.
So, okay, at first I'll have to think, but not off the top of my head. I don't have
No,
it.
I'm judging you because
Well, no. I like the challenge, by the way, right?
so
Why?
So it's my point is, sorry to interrupt. My point is, Wes, is that no matter how how hard you cannot break that robot mentality from a service provider in Brazil. If I ask them what do you like? They'll say, this is what customers like. If I say, what do you like? They'll say, this is what customers like. It's like they're just not capable of sort of like
Giving their
understanding.
opinion.
Yeah, sorry.
Giving their opinion.
Right. Because if they give their opinion, then there's a risk that you won't like it, and then they could get in trouble. That's why. Whereas in the US, it's more like, well, maybe the waiter's got better taste than me. It's like sort of like a competition, right? Like, have you ever been to a restaurant in the US where like this waiter's too sophisticated for me? You know, I mean, that's happened to me like number of times. You get intimidated by waiters. In Brazil, it's sort of like the opposite. So that kind of customer service is also, you know, I don't want to say I don't like it, but that's not the point. The point is, how do you create value through relationships? And the way I do things, I feel is differentiated, and I see results in the things that I do. You know, and I would say this a lot, but just like you, Jay, I mean, I know you think the same way that I do about these kind of things.
One of the most impressive things that I've noticed that Eric does in his portfolio and with his guests is also, it comes from this relationship building. It was that he has via this VIP guest list that he says that he considers friends. As much as they are friends, they also invest in the rooms and they pre-buy rooms, and so they are part of the whole platform of that relationship. That Wesley and I, you know, in other episodes, we talk a lot about that. Like, you have you paid so many dollars to get that person to ring your phone, right? Then you convert it. How come are you not there 6 months later to do a quick checkup and, you know, preventative maintenance? You know what I mean? It is much cheaper to keep it than to do that. But you do that by design through the way that you talk to the person, right? So you design the good customer service in the way of your procedure. So I think once the franchise is completely operational, it is not going to be hard to get that done because it's already by design. So I think that was really special in getting people that use your service to say, hey, I want to, you know, I would love to do this because it's so interesting. It's super powerful. I don't have that. Like, I hadn't even thought about that. You know what I mean? I was very transactional in the way I do. I provide a great service, yada, yada, yada. But after that, like, oh, you know, like, I want to forget about it. Like, I want to move on to the next thing. But there is a lot of power into that, into doing this, and it shows results, and I like it a lot. It's really powerful.
I've been lucky enough to have a couple of big sales in the range of 10,000 guys. And also one of my guests ended up becoming an investor. So that kind of stuff is very underexplored. So I think, you know, that's sort of our next chapter, our next challenge is, you know, we've got these, you know, great pilot projects, and how far can we take this, you know, in terms of the customer experience? You know, it's something that I just don't have the time or the energy to focus on that right now, but I will eventually. Yeah, and I would add to that like I said, I think this idea of a manual, you know, I fight this sort of like bureaucracy, sort of like things that I think are from the past. But I think that I understand that manual is important for you to have, because it's still content, right? You have to have things documented correctly. However, I would say that the more modern concept of being a mentor is probably much more closer to what you want to achieve than, you know, a traditional franchisee with a, you know, PDF and calling you and stuff. I mean, I think mentorship is a little bit closer if you're going to do, you know, more of like a hands-on version of franchise. It's how you might think about it. And that starts from the very beginning of how you're filtering the people that you want to work with, right?
No, absolutely.
Now, these books you're talking about, the franchisee gets one and the franchisor,
Yeah.
are those technically job descriptions? These are your jobs.
No, I wouldn't say that as much. I would more say that it's sort of like a roadmap for how franchises typically work. Don't forget anything. It's sort of like a massive checklist to make sure you covered all your bases. Because I think since it's a new experience for me to work with a franchisee, I wouldn't have enough experience to know all the things I need to think about. It's a good roadmap for you to make sure that you're having a productive relationship. Basically, running the business, I think, is somewhat of it's a related thing, but that's more organic. I think is going to evolve over time.
And let me clarify. In this context is everything, right? In this specific franchise that has no benchmark, right? There's no
Right.
benchmark for what you're doing. Now,
Correct.
he's going for something that there's tons of benchmark, right? They probably have 10,000 of competitors that do the same thing. Wesley just does it better. So
Sure.
what Wesley's asking for, folks that are listening, that document usually would have your operating manual. We would have the job description. So if you have a cashier, if you have this, if you have that, these are their job responsibilities, usually the schedule that they would work. So that entire operating part for the franchisee and their responsibilities, ratio of employees that need to be maintained, etc., to make sure that something is delivered, the licenses for the plumbers, whether you had a master plumber or not, those should be on a franchise like yours. That's like, you have to have it. So if somebody buys the franchise and like, oh, I'm not going to have somebody certified to do it, they're breaking the contract, right? So those things need to be very clear on yours.
Yeah. As I used the example of a mentor, with a mentor, what are you doing? You're really trying to allow other people to leverage your content in the general standpoint, from a general sense. And so I think these manuals provide you with the guidance to do that in an efficient way that is appropriate for franchisees.
I know we're coming out of time, so I'm going to ask a question just came to my mind. If you had all the money in the world, all the time in the world, what problem would you fix?
Housing, for sure.
Why is that?
Because I like the fact that it creates a hard asset when you build housing. And it also, it generates a ton of jobs for people that are building that housing. It solves a lot of my, not to get into too much detail, but my personal theory is that, Brazil's ubiquitous, informal, miserable housing is the primary driver of most of the other social problems. So would you really have the level of violence in Brazil without the informal housing? I don't think so.
No, you wouldn't.
Yeah, of course you would. You'd have cameras, you'd have police that can get to the place they need to go to. You'd have the right kind of security probably. So
lighting, the whole
lighting
structure. Yeah.
People wouldn't be able to hide as well. You wouldn't have wars. Again, that news. Oh, there's another war in Rio. Oh, really? That's not good. No, I mean it's not any different from what you would see in other places in the world that are.
Yeah.
So I think I mean housing is it's a mystery to me why there is so much capital in this world that we live in 2025. I'm 50, so there wasn't as much capital in the 80s. Let me tell you. I mean, there's probably about 20 times more capital in the world today than when I was a kid. So when I was younger, first time I came to Brazil, even in my 20s, like I could understand why there was not enough money to solve this problem. And that was it just seemed like it was insurmountable, But today, with the startup mentality, understanding how the scale works, understanding, how much money this would take and what the returns are, it just baffles me that we have, in Brazil, informal housing is maybe like 40% of people. I think it was just hosted some crazy like international finance thing, has like 55% of people living in favelas. So the numbers are staggering. And
Brazil has
it doesn't make sense to me. Basically, the amount of money that's needed, the returns you would have, both morally, emotionally, physically, and then knowing that the money is there and is being used for other stuff, it just baffles me. So, I mean, I think that's what I would like to work on, and I could talk about that for another hour. So that's not going to be today.
I love it. That's for next time. Wes, do you have any other final questions? Or Eric, do you have any questions for Wes? I know you know me, but do you have any questions for for Wes and
Sure, I would love to know. So you're considering creating a franchise?
Yes, I'm considering on taking one of my businesses and franchising it off.
Sure.
And it's a little different concept to me. So I'm still in the investigation stage and think,
Like it may be easier for you to wrap your head around if you think about it more like mentoring. But what are your, if you have any, what are your biggest concerns or seeing it? How do you see it as an opportunity for your? What are the positive and negatives that you're feeling?
yeah, the positives are I think it's a cheap, a low investment with royalties. If I can get this guy or this franchisee to produce, my fear in the whole thing is, am I doing my part to make sure that he's successful? And what does that look like to me? How labor intensive is that? Am I going to regret it? Now I got to deal with this. Let's say I have more than one franchise.
Yeah.
Am I going to be able to be spread it out thin enough and bring value to that franchisee to be successful to pay off my royalty? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, again, the mentor example, I think that one of the things that, we're looking at outsourcing the sales process. And I love the idea of having someone else talk to 1,000 people, filtering them down to the 10 best, and then me deciding the best one.
Oh, okay.
Right. And so that's a very common thing in mentoring, online mentoring, whereas you're saying it's not that I'm trying to make a sale, so I'm trying to select the person that's best for me. And so that might help you a little bit with your reservations, thinking about it that way.
Yeah. Okay. Good stuff. I got another quick question for you.
Sure.
When you first got into this game, you said that your thought process was monthly rentals.
Yeah.
What was your market? Who was your market? Who's your target market for that thought process? And then it changed, correct?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, but basically, there's a lot of friction in Brazil with renting apartments to live, and the same issue. You have a lot of high end and low end stuff. So if you have a mid-priced furnished studio apartment, then you have a lot of demand, and we did, but just was much better as a hotel product, much more profitable.
Okay. Good stuff.
Yeah.
I appreciate your time today, Eric.
Well, it was nice meeting you both.
Yeah. Nice meeting you as well.
dude, this
Great.
was
Let me know if you have any other questions about my franchising journey as we get going. I'd be happy to speak with anytime.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Where do people find you? The Studio Haus website. How would people get in touch if they want to talk to you?
Yeah, the easiest way is probably through the site, which is actually I couldn't get studiohaus.com or .com.br, so I actually went with
studiohaus.site.
yeah.
And
That's actually our URL. I like to do everything a little bit different.
So tons more to come. Again, Eric, thank you so much. It was a pleasure having
Thank
you
you.
at the CEO Grind podcast.
Thanks, guys.
Follow
have
for me.
have a wonderful weekend. Take care.
Right.
Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.